This isn't funny. The levels are clipping. I can hear the preamp hissing from here.
Just relax, Eric. You always say you want the listeners to feel the cinema. Well, right now, you're living the preamble of the Wachowskis' 1996 debut.
I meant metaphorically. I didn't mean literally duct taping me to a water pipe in a storage closet.
I'm just synergizing the hosting duties. You're Corky, I'm Violet, and the audience is Caesar. Except they're actually going to enjoy themselves.
Haha, you forgot. I keep a Swiss Army knife in my back pocket just for emergency XLR repairs. I'm out. And for the record, that closet is extremely dusty, Jennifer. It's a health hazard.
You ruined the bit. You were supposed to wait for the mid-roll break to escape.
I have a show to run, or rather, you do. I'm Eric Trommater, the man who just escaped a fate worse than a bad sequel.
My name is Casey Bacamini. I'm a writer, director, and a medium.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Mahan, a filmmaker and person who loves film.
Hi, my name is Nicole DeMonesis. I'm a Bay Area writer, director, producer, and the founder of Dark Rainbow Films and the micro horror film festival Blood and Popcorn.
I am Sheila Blume.
My name is Forrest Maria Mitchell. I'm producer, composer, singer-songwriter. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm Kum Kangason, and this is my third time sitting in with this wonderful podcast.
I'm Laura Petrie. I founded the only all-lesbian film festival in the United States called Cinema Sisters Film Festival, and we're celebrating 10 years this year, so come to Paducah, Kentucky in May and join us.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo, and this is World Cinema History.
Jennifer Trujillo, this was your pick. Why did you pick 1996's Bow?
I chose Bound because it's a steamy, sexy, layered, rich feminist film which plays with genre in a lot of unique ways. It was a hot lesbian romance, a gangster film, a heist film, a thriller, a neo-noir film of anti-heroes, and most importantly, for me, it was a movie made by queer people for queer people. They took a big risk for the time when this film was made, and it gave us a bold, positive depiction of strong lesbian characters in a mainstream film. And the two lesbian characters end the film victorious and happy together, and they drive off into the sunset in their brand new big red truck. It was a huge moment in my queer life to see queer and queer with a clear, happy ending represented on screen in a mainstream film. We'd had some subtleties with another favorite of mine, Desert Hearts, back in the 80s, but Bound was unabashedly, clearly queer and queer with a happy ending. And I was totally here for it. I felt totally seen by this film on screen.
As is our tradition when we are graced with the presence of Nicole DeMonesis. Nicole, will you give us a brief plot summary? Something none of us are capable of doing, so we love having you on.
All right, Bound is a neo-noir crime thriller about two women who conspire to steal from the mob and escape their circumstances. Corky, an ex-con just out of prison, takes a job renovating an apartment and meets Violet, the seductive girlfriend of Caesar, a volatile mob money launderer. Drawn to each other, Corky and Violet begin a secret affair that quickly turns into a dangerous plan to steal millions of dollars from Caesar and pin it on his crime and his mob associates.
You seem uncomfortable. Do I make you nervous, Corky?
No.
Thirsty, maybe.
Curious, maybe.
That's funny. I'm feeling a little bit curious myself.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel and to talk about this incredible film. A lot of people don't know that Bound was actually, the success of Bound was the precursor to The Matrix. That the Wachowski sisters pitched The Matrix first to Fox, and they passed and said, what else do you have? And they said, well, we have this noir, and what we've done is we've replaced the main characters with lesbians. And Fox was like, we're in. And the reason why that's important, especially in a world cinema history podcast, is because there was this massive revival of noir stories that was happening right around this mid-90s. So it sort of mirrored the 70s. So in the 70s, you had this sort of neoclassical noir when film noir actually became a set genre, because in order to set a genre, you have to set the rules and then break them. Chinatown is a film noir, except for the fact that it's called dark film, and that film takes place almost entirely at night. So Bound was a neo-noir because for the first time ever, your subjectivity was through Corky. The entire movie is told starting in her memory from the moment you get to the opening scene to the moment you get to her coming out of the closet, so to say. So that whole time, the audience has been a bush lesbian. And I love that about this movie. I think it's a brilliant technique, and unless you really understand how the genre works, you don't really know it. So what else is to love about that? So that's my favorite thing about this movie, and I'm so excited to keep talking about it.
Thanks for sharing, Casey. Where can we find you on the internet, Casey?
You can find me on Instagram at @CaseyBakamini. Good luck spelling that.
Look in the notes, look in the show notes to find more information about all things world cinema history. Chrissy Mahan, what are your opening thoughts on Bound?
Hi. So I am an amateur working class person. I'm not an amateur at being working class, but I'm an amateur filmmaker. And so I'm curious to hear scholars and intellectuals talking about this film, because as a dyke, it's been part of many a potluck conversation.
You came to the wrong podcast. We have neither of those.
So I'm interested to hear the discussion about this.
You said you heard it at many a potluck?
Yes, when this film came out, a lot of people were talking about it for sure, because there weren't many other films like this out there for queer people.
For sure. Chrissy, where can we find you on the internet?
My website is documentary.com.
Awesome. Nicole DeMonesis, what are your opening thoughts on Bound?
Well, first off, I love this film. It's one of my favorite films. It's sexy, it's violent, and it's so gay. It's Big Red Truck in the end credits gay. It's Wear Your Flannels gay. It's Steal Your Girlfriend gay. It's Leave Your Boyfriend in a Pool of His Own Blood gay. Now, just to give you a little story, I remember being a little baby dyke in junior high in Alaska, braving the wind and the snow to go to my local video store to find anything gay, storming the shelves, and I came across two films. One of the films was Bound, and the other was The Incredible True Adventures of Two Girls in Love. So that was one hell of a double feature, and those films definitely got me through some hard times in junior high and through high school, and but Bound is the one I rewatched the most. There's definitely some fantasy fulfillment, and the performances are just so strong, and the film is so stylish that it just holds a really special place in my heart. You can find me at Dark Rainbow Films on Instagram.
There you go. Sila Blume, what are your opening thoughts on Bound?
I like very much a comment that was made before, and it's something that confused me at some point during the film, and now I understand the context. Because I didn't see it a second time, I didn't catch that. The fact that the story is being told while she's in the closet. And of course, using the closet as a metaphor, as we have been using it for 40 years or so, I find that very, very interesting, even though she is not as a lesbian coming out of the closet. The trajectory of the film, the way I'm reading the story, the way I'm perceiving the story, I found that very interesting. I like very much the style. It reminded me somehow of the style of the Dead Ringers with Jeremy Irons. The minimalism, or the way I saw the film. It also reminds me of the music of Sade. There's no the extravagance of what's going on and what I'm looking at is done in a very, very reduced way, but with a very strong effort to make it a lot of style. I really like that. I like women, so I see the film a little bit differently. It's not a film that I would go for as a lover of Bergman and a few other things, but I'm very glad that I got to see it.
I'm glad you watched it and you were here to talk about it, Sila. Where can we find you on the internet, Sela?
Most of my work I put on selablume.life.
Koen Kangason, what are your opening thoughts on Bound?
I was really happy that I was forced to watch this again decades later. I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but I remember being recommended to see it and then feeling vaguely disappointed compared to the hype. However, watching it literally 30 years or so after it was released, it still has a very strong impact. And as other people have just attested, it's groundbreaking. So, you can still feel that impact. How did I feel about the film? I felt like there were some things I liked and some things I didn't. So in the end, it was kind of a wash for me. And Jennifer and I were joking at the end of last week's podcast that she'd suffered through a couple of films that I was sitting in on that I liked very much. So I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, or vice versa. I think in this one, I might just kind of sit back a little and hear what other people thought, and happy to do so. In terms of finding me on the net, the thing I'm maybe most currently proud of is my last novel, Killing Shakespeare. You can get that as a regular old-fashioned book or an ebook, wherever you like to get books.
Thanks, Koom, and I really appreciate you watching the films and willing to be part of this conversation. And, we often have conflict as part of our conversations, and that's okay. That's discourse. It's real discourse.
Agreed.
Otherwise, I would do the show myself.
Right? Fair enough. Let's go, Laura Petrie. What are your opening thoughts on Bound?
I didn't see it in the theater. I didn't even know about the movie. I was out of college. A friend of mine put it on in her home, and I was blown away. I had never seen a butch lesbian like this as a lead role, and just from the very beginning, the tattooed labrys on her arm, the thumb rings, the wife beater shirt, just all about it was more the world that I knew, the women that I knew in my life. Here comes Jennifer Tilly in a completely different role, and the dynamics between them, the hot sex, just they connected right away in the elevator, and it just got stronger from there. I really loved the film. I've seen it many times, and I could probably quote the whole thing. But I love that it's noir, it's new noir, and it's got iconic quotes and symbolism and unapologetic sex, and the deliberate directing, I think, holding long shots on the sex scenes, and just some of the camera moves and angles and the music. The whole thing just kept me just focused on the screen. I love the movie.
I love it too.
You can find more about Cinema Sisters Film Festival coming up Memorial Day in May in Paducah, Kentucky at www.cinemasisters.com. It's spelled with a Y.
In the Sisters, Systers.
That's it.
Amazing. I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to it. Eric Trommater, it is your turn, my friend. What are your opening thoughts on Bound?
I decided to let Jennifer take the lead as we dive deep into the neo-noir rain-slick tension of Bound. First off, this is my fucking show.
For now, Eric.
Since we are a history podcast, I am going to put this film in a tiny bit of historical context. Before we get too deep into the conversation, we have to talk about what this film is based around. The social contract. In the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan. His whole deal was that without a big scary sovereign to keep us in check, humans revert to a state of nature, a war against all where life is, and I quote, nasty, brutish, and short. Usually we look at the law as a state, and that state to be the sovereign. But in Bound, the Wachowskis give us a world where the sovereign isn't the police or the government, it's the mob. It's purely transactional. It's a violent ecosystem where the only peace is found by following the rules of the family. Corky and Violet aren't just trying to steal money, they are trying to break that Hobbesian contract and survive in a state of nature that follows. And in many ways, it previews the philosophical nature of their following film, The Matrix. The first time we see Corky, she isn't a character. She's a composition. She is tied up in a dark closet, a visual prologue that immediately establishes a contract with the viewer. We aren't just watching a noir, we're watching a survivor navigate a machine. Most people see the Wachowskis through the pop culture chic of their later work, the comic book sprawl of The Matrix, but Bound is different. It's their most sophisticated film because it's their most disciplined. It's a purely visual treat that doesn't rely on twists. It rests on the bones of cinematic history. And those bones go back to 1929. If you look closely at Jennifer Tilly's Violet, you aren't seeing a standard 90s femme fatale. You're seeing Louise Brooks in Pandora's Box from 1929. That iconic 1929 bob, the wardrobe, the geometry of her movements, it's all there. But there's a subversion happening. In 1929, Brooks' Lulu was an instinctive force of nature, often destroyed by the world around her. In Bound, Violet takes that Lulu mask, the wide-eyed look, and that breathy, childlike voice, and weaponizes it. The voice is the tell. It's a performance of innocence meant to disarm the predators in the room. While the men see a baby doll, we see the master mechanic. I'm not suggesting that Bound is a remake of Pandora's Box, or even that Pandora's Box was a direct influence, but as a cinephile, you can't ignore the visual tether. Whether it's something that was just in the zeitgeist or a shared understanding of how to use a set, both films treat their characters with a rare explicit honesty. For instance, Alice Roberts' character in the 1929 film wasn't coded. She was just queer. And in 1996, Corky and Violet occupy that same space of direct visibility. They aren't metaphors. They are the architects of the world that we're seeing. So forget the gritty realism of the 1940s noir. I know that the Wachowskis claimed that their inspiration for this was Billy Wilder and Double Indemnity. But how did they go to make something that was inspired by Double Indemnity and make a film that ended up looking like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari? Bound is a German Expressionist film in modern clothing. The apartments aren't homes. They're flats, stylized, psychological stages. The geometry. Think about that. Notice the sharp lines, the thin shared walls. The set is a third protagonist that records every movement and every secret. And the shadows are important here. In this world, the shadows aren't menacing the way they are in film noir. They are simply the unseen edges of a world we're not allowed to see. They curate our focus, isolating the characters in a void of their own making. And the film is obsessed with the tactile, the wet paint, the chrome, the silk. It's a sensory experience that grounds the philosophy in something you can almost touch. There's a reason the Wachowskis were drawn to graphic novels. When talkies took over, the purely visual storytelling of the silent era didn't die, it just moved into the panels of comic books. And Bound is that perfect hybrid. It uses the visual economy of a graphic novel panel, but it fills it with the soul of a 1920s masterpiece. It's the last time they interacted with the media this intelligently before they began, in my opinion, dumbing down these images for mass consumption.
I had to see you.
Look, I don't think this is a good idea.
I wanted to apologize.
Please, don't apologize. There's one thing I can't stand is women who apologize for wanting sex.
I'm not apologizing for what I did. I'm apologizing for what I didn't do.
I liked Bound. I liked Bound a lot. But it's no Godard's Weekend. It's no Children of Paradise. It is certainly no Passion of Anna. And it's no Vitelloni. To use Fausto from last week's film as an example, he is clearly, if not the villain of Vitelloni, at least the antagonist. He does a lot of despicable things, and Fellini is clearly satirizing his behavior and that of his group of cohorts. But he never kills anybody. He doesn't physically assault anyone. Yet you were offended, Jennifer, to the point where you almost shut the film off. Godard's Weekend is a film with a very similar premise to Bound, where the couple sets off to commit a heinous crime, and again, you found the couple too unlikable and the film too mean-spirited. Now, we'll talk about how the Wachowskis were able to accomplish what they did on what was considered a very small budget, But Godard shot Weekend for $250,000, whereas the Wachowskis were dealing with almost $6 million. Weekend has almost 30 locations, whereas this film basically has 2. Jennifer, what was it in this film where the characters were likable enough for you to become attached to them? How did these 2 directors succeed, where names like Carney and Prévert, Ingmar Bergman, Federico Fellini, and Jean-Luc Godard failed you the last 4 weeks?
I think for me, the quintessential point is, having grown up a lesbian, having grown up in the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, and for much of the first portion of my life, into my late teens or into my 20s, I was impacted by what you referenced, Eric, the Hays Code. For people that don't know, the LGBTQIA plus community, the queer community, the rainbow of humanity, was allowed to be in stories on paper, in books, or on screen if we came to a bad end. We had to commit suicide, we had to die, we had to be unhappy, we had to be miserable. And that is the world, for someone who from a very young age knew that I was queer, knew that I was a lesbian. That's the world that I grew up in. And then to have a film as quintessential as Desert Hearts come out, which was a period piece with, spoilers, an implied uplifted possibility of a happy ending. There's a positive connection. It is still openly women on screen, was amazing. And then we hit this film Bound, which was unabashedly 2 women drawn together as being primary protagonists and working together, falling into a trusting relationship and working together to pull a heist on the mob and the people around them. And they were written off because they were women, particularly, which is a whole nother impact for me on this film. And then queer. I attached to these characters because they were, I said it, I was absolutely starved, beyond starved in my life to have any of this ever be seen on screen. And to have it in a film was mind-blowing. And I understand that that puts me in a skewed reference as far as cinematic history and the judging of these films, but this was monumental to me. And I think they did pull off an incredibly well-crafted film.
My main question is, when you're talking about Godard's Weekend and you're talking about Bound in the same sentence, you're talking about two completely different genres, because Weekend is not
how
a film noir.
How are they 2 different genres, Casey?
Weekend is not a film noir. Weekend is not a film noir. Now, however, Jean-Luc Godard did have as his precursor loved film noir and studied it, as Cahiers du Cinema, all of them, Truffaut and Godard, cut their teeth on the traditional 1940s film noir, which has as its roots German Expressionism, right? The line that you've drawn from Pandora's Box all the way through to even Godard to Bound is you're talking about the lengthy history of people who loved this very specific swath of films that had also the precursor of the gangster film, but you're talking about the same sort of techniques used, but the specific part of Bound that is important and why it's separate from Weekend is that you are locked inside the mind of the character and you are hearing everything in hindsight. So every aspect of Bound, until you catch up to Corky coming out of the closet, it is from her perspective. It is told from her perspective, which makes it very exclusive to a film noir genre tactic. That is its purpose. That's its point in the film, is that for the entire film, everybody has been a butch lesbian. And when you're talking about the point of the movie, Weekend, right, is about consumerism. Bound is very specifically about women's role and women's rights in terms of commerce, and specifically their body. It's like, where do women get paid, and talk about the historical context of this. This is 1996, so we're talking about the massive backlash against second wave feminism, which this movie is wrought with. And considering its directors, this is a very, very specific topic, because you're talking about trans women who are working within the constraints of their budget to have as their first voice into cinema be through 2 women. That is important to know. You're talking about apples and oranges. So if you think that Bound, because it's beautiful and interesting and was commercially acceptable and you think that that is something that we should reject as a cinematic practice, I strongly urge you to go back and look at the context of it in a neo-noir, because it is revolutionary when you look at the genre.
Aren't we basically admitting, or we've given up and said, style can take us anywhere as long as this is done stylistically enough? It really doesn't matter. I will empathize with these characters as long as you package this to me as an entertainment. If you're picky enough to say, Vitelloni is a film I could barely finish watching, but Bound is a classic masterpiece, I do think that that does require some explanation as far as the series goes.
Well, for me, for me, part of it is the characters. Fausto is non-consensually going after all of these women in his life and pushing and pushing and pushing. And we debated, you all had some things that the women were being minxed and leading him on, but it was non-consensual touching after non-consensual touching and pushing. And the men around him, boys will be boys, letting him do it, looking the other way. Bullshit. Violet and Corky are consensually touching each other. The men that touch Violet is consenting to that world and the using her body as what she needs to do to survive, to get along, to get resources, to exist. This is a personal thing for me, and I keep coming at this podcast on some level from that level of character development and story. But I really struggled with Fausto just being predatory and non-consensual and it being laughed off through the whole thing. And then to hear the whole, it's a minx, like, I'm sure people would say that about Violet in Bound, that, she was doing what she needed to do. Sure, Violet was absolutely changing her voice, her pitch, her clothing for how she behaved with the men in the room and how she behaved with Corky, which I thought was another magical part of this film, that she changed her clothes, changed her voice, changed the way she coded herself in there. And some of this is me, and I'm sorry that we're putting people in a spot of how I personally took those films. And I did say my piece. I was struggling with the boys. And as for film stuff, like, I give exactly the scene you're talking about, that huge Wan lung shot. There were parts of The Weekend that I appreciated. And I know you said to me, it's a simple story. It's a simple story. I got the story in Bound way more than I got the story in The Weekend. I just did. And, that may speak to my inexperience, my ignorance or whatever, or how I was coming at it as a viewer, but that's the fact for me as someone watching it.
Both of the women were, quote, imprisoned for 5 or so years. Literally, Corky was in prison, but Violet was imprisoned by the violence and the mob and the prostitution that she was having to do. The feminist or women's point of view here is the reciprocal sex of the lesbians. The iconic quote when Violet says, I'm not apologizing for what I did. I'm apologizing for what I didn't do. Meaning she wanted to, have reciprocal sex with Corky. And the men were excited by the violence. Corky and Violet, they wanted out. Corky wanted out of the crime scene. She said that earlier at the bar. Violet wanted out of that whole patriarchal mob scene. And thank God they got away together. Yay.
Jennifer is maybe going to put up with a film that has more flaws than I will in order to be able to see herself on screen, because I can see myself on screen as a white cis male almost anywhere else.
Which is why I even pulled the people into the room that are here. People that are part of the world of bringing our stories of LGBTQIA plus stories to life on screen and celebrating and amplifying them in ways that we need. I am starved for it. I know other people are starved for it. I said this during Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I mean, you have an advantage. The patriarchy and cis males, it's all been for you, of you, about you, except for the parts of queer independent films or occasionally a mainstream film that gets a foot in the door as a mainstream Hollywood film and shows our stories and parts of our stories and slices of our life on screen, which isn't the norm. It's really not. It's an exception when that happens for us.
It kind of makes you want to say, I can see again.
And I do think that we as a podcast are trying to make a small dent in that. Whether we're succeeding in it or not, it is a goal of this podcast to have discussion that makes it easier for internationally more films from more point of view to be available, whether it's queer, minority based on skin color, African cinema. That is the whole point of world cinema history.
That's why I'm here, Eric. I appreciate that you have that dialogue, that you understand that dialogue. You gave me an utmost amount of respect that after the Portrait of a Lady on Fire episode, you watched Bulletproof, A Lesbian Guide to Surviving the Plot. And
let's give a shout out to the documentary called Dykes Camera Action. It just showed recently at the Roxy Theater. It's still Lesbian Visibility Week. It's the end of the week, so encourage people to watch more lesbian cinema.
There you go.
Yes, thank you for saying that, Nicole.
This is Maria. I'd like to say something really quick. One of the big things for me, because I'm right there with Jen and Laura and Nicole, in that the 90s for me was you had to be a radical lesbian feminist and a butch, and anything else was not accepted in the community. And to actually see Bound, and for them to portray Jennifer Tilly so feminine and so powerful, where she says sex with men, that's work, that's her power, that's what she does to survive. I like that all of that was portrayed. It gave possibilities and positivity.
And I think one of the better things that they do is the costuming, because when you have the scenes between Violet and Corky, Jennifer Tilly is allowed to dress down and be in jeans, and she's able to drop the breathy kind of baby doll meets Marilyn Monroe, and I think that's one of the better character elements that they do in this film, is showing the closeted life, that this is the mask that she wears. It's the same mask that Lulu wore all the way back in 1929 in Pandora's Box, and I think that's one of the better elements of the film.
Those dresses are Jennifer Tilly's dresses. Like, it was a low budget, and she looks great in those dresses. There's even a funny scene where they're pulling the dress down because she's slung over the guy's shoulder. She embodies that character, and she had the wardrobe just waiting to back it up. Gina Gershaw, she was happy to give us her best James Dean impression, wear a flannel, and that swagger. There's definitely an appeal, and they brought likability to those characters that I don't think was on the original page, that they brought out through their performances.
The only difference is I can fuck someone I've just met. Still, I need to know someone like I know myself.
You think you know me like that?
At the end of the movie, Corky turns to Violet and says, "Do you know what the difference between you and me is?" And she said, "Absolutely nothing." And that is a very important statement, because it doesn't matter what Jennifer Tilly sounds like, which goes to the larger point of the way in which Corky is sexualized and also violently beaten in the movie versus the way that Violet is sexualized in the movie and controlled but is able to wield her power, and how speaks very clearly to the way in which women are trapped in their sexuality all the time. Is that butch lesbians, especially in the 90s, were subjected to mass amount of violence because they reject men's sexuality, and that is against the law. It's against the law in the rules of the film, and it was against societal codes then and especially now. Violet's sexuality is completely obscured, except for the fact that she has to fight for it. Just like she has to fight to be in her relationship with Corky, she even has to prove her own sexuality to Corky. And the fact that when you see the lesbian sex scene, it is the femme who's the top. It is the femme who's doing the work. And that is extremely important, because I have not seen that in a film ever. And that was stark contrast to many, many things, whereas the masculine person always has the power, and that is completely subverted. Violet is the one that knows the plot. She knows the schemes. She's the one that makes the phone call at the end to Mickey. She's the one that carries through the narrative at the very end. She is the one in power. It is the femdom in power, and that is very important.
Well, Jennifer Tilly tried out for the Corky part too. That's what's interesting. I would love to see
what she
the
wanted.
audition version of that. What she would have.
Me too.
Me too.
Linda Hamilton was supposed to be Violet. And my understanding is that she wanted to be Corky really bad, Jennifer Tilly, which I don't know that I could imagine her as.
I can't.
As Corky.
Well,
Because
Nicole,
I think she just
as a
nailed
horror
Violet.
film fan, Tilly did play some much more, shall we say,
Are you talking about the Chucky franchise?
Not just Chucky, but but what she did for Chucky. But yeah, definitely Chucky. I mean, she was a fully rounded actress who could. I think she could have done a very good job with Corky, quite honestly.
I also think she's a very smart actress that can do. Love seeing her in comedies. She's very clever and has great comedic timing.
Also a world poker champion.
Right,
which
he's very bright and very calculated.
Be still my Texas Hold'em loving heart. When she won the celebrity championship in 2005, it was just like, okay, yeah, she's one of us.
Yeah, I got to see her live in person at the Roxy Theater. She did a show with Peaches Christ for one of the Chucky movies, and even more fun in person. So she's got a lot of fans in San Francisco.
I love her.
I heard reference a couple times over the last week of people saying how Jennifer Tilly played characters in Chucky and how I should watch those after having watched Bound or vice versa. Can you sum that up for me, Nicole?
She's like the killer girlfriend of the serial killer, and she gets turned into a killer doll, and they have a killer kid together that's very queer, and the queer killer kid goes on to do lots of bad things. I mean, they even kill John Waters in one of them. It just got, the franchise got gayer and gayer, which was wonderful, and it also speaks to the writer of the original films, and then they also translated that queerness to the TV show, and it's had another life on as a TV series. But her films, I think, are like the third and fourth in the franchise. But there's a promise that she might come back to do one more. And that would be so fun, because she is adorable as a voice actor for the killer doll that she inhabits, but it's also fun to see her comedic, campy side with her as a person in it. Yeah.
And as a fan of Star Wars, Mark Hamill is Chucky. So there's that for you, Jennifer.
What? I totally did not know that. Okay. Fascinating new facts I learn all the time.
Was there a butch or femdyke involved in the creation, the acting, and the production of the film? I truly don't know.
They had a
Susie
lesbian consultant. That's right.
Susie Bright, Susie Sexpert, was the professional consultant on the film. And to speak of the times, she chose to just say technical consultant in the credits because of how still violent the world was. Ellen DeGeneres hadn't come out. This was a big deal. But Susie, they asked her to be in the bar scene. She's the woman that Corey approaches at the table. When she read for that and they cast her, she said, look, you guys, I want to help you. Look, Wachowskis, I want to help you with all of the other parts of the film to help make it as true to sapphic or lesbian and queer as we can, and to allow them the permission, the Wachowskis, to bring out the things that they wanted to even bring into the film. And Susie Bright put people in the bar that were part of her life. She asked, can I bring in some other legitimate San Francisco or other local lesbians? And they said yes. As you walk down the bar towards Jesse, there's a woman with short, dark, salt and pepper hair. That's one of Susie's exes. But they worked really hand in hand to help with that, with the sex scenes. There's so much subtle queer coding in this film, from the texture, of what happens with her, all the hands, all the imagery with hands, so much stuff. So yes, to that question, they had a consultant in on the film, aside from the Wachowskis themselves, who are both, queer human beings.
The role of the artist is to say things that have an effect, that give us something to think about. As a heterosexual man, I appreciate very much these conversations. I appreciate this type of film because I think it allows us to see angles of life that we are not familiar with. And we don't have to agree with them. We don't have to disagree with them. We don't even have to give an opinion about it. But just to hear in this conversation about the point of view, the way some of you have led your lives, as opposed to what I have seen as life, it allows me to say, okay, I can relate to this. I can understand. I'm being put in a very, very different context. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable or comfortable. It doesn't matter about the comfortability level. I have witnessed this many times with music, especially Benjamin Britten with Apollo, John Cage, Steve Reich, Philip Glass, Paulina Oliveros, who happened to be a lesbian. These people composed and played music that I was shocked. I was shocked to listen to the music for the first time, because it allowed me to find out about a world that I never imagined it existed. And I think that is a very important role of the arts, be it cinema, literature, very much, music to some extent, to allow a person who is unaware or even rejects certain things about parts of the community to be able to see a different angle, and as a result to be able to accept it as normal. It doesn't have to be a dyke, it doesn't have to be heterosexual. It's just a matter of being presented with a certain way of life that I'm forced to say to myself, wow, this is not what I do, but it's very revelatory for me to think about this film and to think of several aspects that you have been talking about, and realize that was never part of my world, but I have to. It's a gain for me to find out about it.
Mm. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, and I hope you understand the depth of, we're fighting for equal human rights. We're fighting for our lives. The trans community here in the States and around the world is fighting for their very existence, their existence, not even equal human rights, just even to live, to vote, to participate in community, to go to the bathroom when they're out in public. For queer people, we haven't had equal rights. We just haven't. And we are starved for rights and for representation. And so I appreciate you being willing to open. I know you have said love is love to you, and I appreciate that about you, Sila, but thank you for pointing that out.
I understand what you mean with equality, and I am not against it. However, I have my difficulties. That's a personal thing. My difficulties with equality. I think equality is an illusion. It doesn't exist, and it will never exist, because we are different. But to what I was saying just now, I want to be able to sit with certain people and find out about what their experience is in life. Not to be able to agree with them, not to be able to say, well, you're wrong. I think it's about respect. To respect that your life or the way you lead life has a validity just like me. And I don't expect anything to be equal, but I do not expect everybody to listen to Johann Sebastian Bach, even though in my neighborhood I constantly hear listen to rap music, which I find quite bad. I cannot expect these people to listen to Bach or to Wagner, but just to be able to find out what are you perceiving. And when I sit down with a friend of mine in London who's homosexual, I want to know from him, what is that for you? What does that? I'm curious about finding out what is that for you, because I don't know that world.
What I find very interesting about film in general is its entire purpose is for you to passively be forced into the subjectivity of whatever the camera is looking at. The visual pleasure and narrative cinema, that seminal essay, talks about the camera as the gaze, right?
I agree.
Correct?
Yes.
So that is what makes it so special. So when you are in a film, that film and that collection of people, because it's not just the writer, it's not just the director, it's not just the actors, it's largely the editor, is asking you to step into a world that you didn't know. And the thing that I love so much about world cinema is the things that I'm looking at when I'm watching a movie that's completely in French or in Spanish. Means that without the words at the bottom of the screen, I don't know what's going on. So I'm perceiving a world that I don't have access to through language. It's the sight and the sound. I can still enjoy it even if I don't understand it, given the movie. That's the power of the movie. That's why we're talking about movies and not poems. Is the ability to step quite literally into the life of somebody else and see it as if it were your own eyes. That's also what makes it such a powerful device in myth making and story making, because you have things like sound and camera angle and choices which show you what a character is how you're supposed to perceive that character. That's why the German Expressionism in film noir specifically is being used to show you who to root for, who to boo, who to be afraid of, what types of communities exist only in shadows, who walks around only at night, and you're supposed to know instantly what to do with that fear or discomfort or expectation. And I think that Bound does this really well, because it is a totally and utterly white film. It is a white ethnic film, to be specific.
Well, and you have that fade of white when Joy Vance gets shot in the white paint that looked like something straight out of Persona or Passion of Anna. To me, I thought that was a great visual cue for the aesthetic of the entire film, that it brought home, oh wow, there was a lot of white, and that the obsession with things like the viscous liquids that you see all the way through, I saw as being a symbol of blood, but it could have meant something different to the Wachowskis when they were filming this, that complex layer that it creates.
The entire film is red, white, and black.
And green.
And there is green in it, you're right.
What other
and it's full of
have
wet.
you watched recently that used red, white, black, and green as its main color coding? Oh, and yellow, because there's yellow in this as well. Jennifer,
Tuki Bookie?
Do you remember?
Was it Tuki Bookie? Tuki Bookie?
No, it was Godard's Weekend.
Weekend. Ding, ding, ding. Look at me. Screw.
But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the visual style of this film, because I think it does do that very, very well, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for it. But I'm going to get my criticism out of the way. It's also filled with these Ken Russell style campy gimmicks, like the following the telephone cord from one apartment to the other, or the camera coming out of the barrel of the gun, and things like that look like something from a 90s music video. And those are moments that, because of the careful aesthetics and the careful use of the shadows and the way that they carefully structure these shots so that you know exactly where the edge of the world begins and where it ends, I almost want to tear of this film, because they're beneath, I think, the intelligence of the rest of the set decoration and the cinematography of the film, because it's camp, but it's kind of a pop culture chic camp. And I think in those moments they are hiding the depth behind the tricks that they are using that I think are much more intelligent. In a way, what makes Ken Russell and the Wachowskis so irritating is that the camp seems to be there strictly to dumb everything down in those moments. In Russell's case, it was classical music. In Bound, it's film noir and German Expressionism. They both seem to be saying, here's what you guys want. Here's the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves shot. And I do wish that they had gotten away from the Ken Russell camp bits. But, Jennifer, you had a question for the panel about how me as a heterosexual male and you as a lesbian interpret film differently. And what was that question that we rehearsed?
1,000%. Why do gay people love camp so much? And I love the camp in this film. You know this. We have talked about this. And I am flipping here for its fabulous shininess over the top. But can anyone on the panel speak to the camp?
I love the, for instance, I thought it was very cute the way they did the little loop-de-loop following the phone cord from Violet to Corky. You know, the camera even made the loop in the film. You know, it was cute. And then the barrel of the gun pulls out to the, I guess it's Glenlivet in a glass. I love that stuff. It just made the film noir, even more visually stimulating to me. It wasn't dumbed down.
And even the moment of panning up over the wall with the two hands on the wall, I'm here for that. Every single scene, the dollar bill rotating into the Violet sitting on the couch with the laundry lines of dollar bills, with Caesar in the back in his apron. I mean, he's very feminized and part of the film. He's hysterical. He can't be feminized. He's wearing an apron. He's hysterical. He blows his finger like it's a mani-pedi when he goes to get the suit when Corky's in there having just stolen the money and was going to steal the money, hiding in the office. Anyways, other people, what do you think about camp and why our gays love camp so much and why we need camp or why we celebrate camp?
I mean, I think that when you're talking about the kids say these days, like, that's a filthy read. And the point of negotiating the world as you know it versus the myths that we all pretend, camp is a way of criticizing something through hyperbole. It has a very long tradition in poetry and in literature, and the way in which the queer community has had to camp up our own presentation of the world everybody pretends to live in as us is how we exist. Like, one of the, you're talking about a time period in the 1940s where one of the most famous examples of true heterosexual love was embodied by a gay man in Cary Grant. That's camp. That performance of heterosexuality, those musicals that were choreographed by queer people and were showing a world that is queer, those are camp. And so our subversion of camp to then be a presentation of the world in which we see it and are participating in it is our way of saying, how can you possibly take any of this seriously? This is all a joke. That is my understanding. It's our ability to instead of being the joke or being erased by the myth, we get to tell the joke and star in it too.
I was watching Hitchcock's Rope last night, which I think watching it so close to having watched Bound, Alfred Hitchcock was creating a gay camp movie, I think, and forgot to tell Jimmy Stewart that he was in a gay movie.
I think Jimmy Stewart knew very well he was in a gay movie. I think everybody in Rope knew what he was doing. And I also think that Bound is very much akin to Rope.
They have a lot of similarities, and it is interesting that I happen to be watching the two back to back. What was interesting that the Wachowskis do that Hitchcock also did was the almost over the topness of it is cueing you into the gayness. Is that something that you want as your visual standard? That something that the way to cue people that this is resonance as a queer film is to dial everything up to 11. Is something like Portrait of a Lady on Fire more effective? I don't have answers because I'm not in that community, so I can't perceive it through your eyes. I'm asking it as a question.
That is that's very narrow thinking. We all have our different likes and dislikes, so we're just humans like everyone else.
I think the stylized camera movements initially serve the story, and you're giving Hitchcock a pass for being the one that will cue the audience in because there's a bomb under the table or there's a body in a trunk. Why aren't you giving the Wachowskis the same pass, and it's part of their storytelling, and that's why they're doing dynamic camera movements? You're saying they're exaggerating, they took you out of the story. I think they enhanced the story.
I disagree with you. I'm not giving Hitchcock a pass. I don't think Rope is a well-done movie. I think it is too over the top, and I think I don't particularly care for what he did with that film, quite honestly. But I'm a straight guy, and I don't respond to camp the same way. So I'm not saying that is
like how you're using camp with the negative connotation, like in that Bound with, specifically about the camera movements. Are you specifically talking about how the characters are visually depicted? How are you using the word camp to describe Bound?
Well, actually, that's a very, very good question. That is a very, very good question. And I'm only talking about camp moments in the film that affected me as a viewer. I felt uncomfortable with them. That it was that I'm following this story. I want to kind of get back to. I want to get back to the shadows. I want to get back to Violet and Corky. And we've got to have this little music video shot in here for a few minutes, or for a few seconds. And I understand. But here is why Jennifer and I came up with this as a question. That is a personal aesthetic that I have, because I did not grow up with camp being considered an art form. I'm starting to realize that it is its own art form. I am actually starting to appreciate a non-queer camp version, Ken Russell. I rewatched The Devils recently. I rewatched The Boyfriend recently. I rewatched Tommy and Let's Stop Mania, and I do see what he's doing.
Not all of Bound is camp, but they're using...
No, only a few shots. Yes, only a few shots.
Right, so it's not your particular brand of camp because it's stylized? Or I would argue that Bound is not campy in the sense that it is like a traditional camp, like a John Waters movie. What it is doing is it's landing itself in the dialogue style and mood of the genre for which it's representing.
No,
it is laced.
A David Lynch camp is the feeling I got. It's the
same. They're pulling from the same. David Lynch is pulling from the same genre pool that Bound is. They're talking about 1940s.
Yeah,
James
I agree
Cain.
100%.
Right. It's the same thing. So I'm just going back to the root as opposed to the echoes. So it's less camp and it's more genre. I mean, it's in the genre.
Well, and remember too, these directors, it's their first big directorial debut. They were, throwing everything in the literal kitchen sink and trying to be stylish and memorable because they were trying to make that bigger film, like Casey was saying earlier. And, for $6 million, they were doing a lot with practical locations, minimal sets, minimal sets and crew. So I wouldn't fault them for wanting to throw something in more stylish, because I think it added to the dynamic of the story.
I totally agree.
I think they pulled me into the stories personally as someone watching. And my understanding to the point of the budget and making the bigger film is that they started with a lower budget, and then they started showing dailies and parts of the film to Dino De Laurentiis, and then asking Dino for more money. The budget
they
kept
didn't
going
even
up.
have
It
Chris
almost...
Maloney or any of those other characters when they started shooting the film. They were able to pull those in after De Laurentiis upped the budget. So this was originally just going to be the three characters.
And he incrementally...
He upped the budget because of Jennifer Tilly's Oscar nod.
All these things is my understanding. And even to the point that they had... Gina Gershon in some of the interviews says the Wachowskis felt that they had tapped Dino in asking for more money. So they had her call and ask him for more money for different things. And some of it was the way the film, the dailies and what they were seeing from the visuals. But the visuals for me, they pulled me in. I love them. They were not over the top for me. I've already said how much I love them.
And what a great cast.
It did turn out to be a great cast, for sure. Joe Pantaleone was amazing as Caesar. And Joey Pants was great.
One of the things that Eric had said and that everyone has talked about is the pure visual treat. Talk about starving for representation. A lot of things that you do not see is that longing, that sexual tension, especially from a lesbian standpoint, the sexual tension in the elevator scene. Corky is intensely watching. They make the eye contact. They have that connection, but then Corky watches her walk out of the elevator. And then she has that deep breath and the exhale to release that tension at that moment. I think it's very intense. And I love that.
I think the film is filled with great little moments like that. And its obsession with hands and fingers throughout this, and almost a sexualization of females' fingers. It's the way it almost fetishizes them. That's a great element of this film. I think it does so well.
There's no almost, Eric.
You look at hands and fingers as a sexual object, and that's done subtly and that's done intelligently.
Yeah, let's talk about another iconic scene. How about the blood drop into the toilet, then the splatter, then the face smash into the toilet, then the face dunked into the toilet, and then finally they get to the pruning shears and the finger cut off. That's not necessarily sexual, and but that was a hell of a scene, wasn't it?
I mean, coming from a lesbian standpoint, it's not felt like, yeah, for sure, it is. This was all, there's so much hand symbolism, even when she runs her hand through the finger brush, the paintbrush, after they've had the connection, and then she feels that slick feeling on her fingers, and then almost smelling or tasting her hand. That is a very queer, that is two queer people from queer people for queer people. And it may be subtle and great understanding to the larger heteronormative community, but for queer people, that was pure gold. I mean, to the point that I know that when this film played at Frameline in 1996, it was a packed theater, and the crowd, pounded their feet on the floor and pounded on the chairs and stood up for this film, and shocked, not necessarily shocked all of them that it was so well received by the queer community, because it was. And there were people that pushed back at the time for other reasons, but I cannot tell you how much I saw queer in this. Subtle, like, those are bold, brash moments. Hands are part of our sex. I mean, they are. They're just part of the reality. Our whole bodies are. Go ahead.
And let's talk about the word dyke. They use the word dyke like 3 times maybe in this film. And you don't hear that often so much. But did anyone else, when he came in the first time and met Corky and he thought she was a guy, and then he said, "It's fucking dark in here," did anybody else feel like that was a play on fucking dyke?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's very intentional. And
Me too.
I think that the Chicago accent play, because he really amped it up, was intentional to make it sound like just close to that word. Also, going back to that visual component of Shelley and the toilet and the bowl and the hose, is that Shelley is punished, right, for where he put his fingers. He put his fingers in the money jar, but he also, and I think that the way that Shelley was punished and the way that Violet was specifically punished is like, oh man, he's really missing a key here. Like, he's really missing that what Shelley did and what Violet did are similar, and they're being punished in similar ways. There's so many visual cues that way of where the male violence or sort of male penetration is considered a weakness in that film.
I mean, such a clever script, and that Bill Pope got the cinematography job, and then the editor, they all worked together. It's super tight and well and clever. I really
Wake up, you fucking dyke. Good. I know everything now, so I don't want to hear any I don't know bullshit. You understand? God, I should have seen this coming the minute I met you. Everybody knows your kind can't be trusted.
It's fucking dark in here is echoed later, like, wake up, you fucking dyke. I mean, that's just dyke. It sticks in my head in such a great way. And having heard that aggression, again, that was another way I felt seen in that film. I mean, I've had people throw that word at me my whole life, and I own it. I'm happy to say I'm a dyke. But the way he used it, and I don't know, I just, talk about being seen in this film. I'm here for it.
Well, when he said fucking dark in here, he had Rembrandt lighting, on his face. And then when he said the second time he called her a dyke, wake up dyke, his eye twitched.
I think, there's probably lots of different ways you can approach the film. But if we were to take 2 ways, we can say one way is what a lot of the people who have been talking have been approaching it from, in terms of it resonating and it being groundbreaking and really speaking to all of those codes of being queer and being lesbian and the complexity of that and the absence of that. And then the other way is to approach it from the way Eric's been looking at it in terms of what it does cinematically. And I think sometimes one approach gets conflated with the first kind of approach, which is as a film that's opened a much needed space for viewers who are queer. I can only listen and understand, and it's been really interesting listening. I will say that a lot of times, like, I'm a person of color, and that doesn't even come up in most of the conversations or the spaces I go into. So last week we were discussing Evidoloni, and I think I had to say to Jennifer, as an example, I really like the film The Age of Innocence as a kind of a parallel, because even though I know nothing about the space of Victorian New Yorkers, and I don't like those characters, the film is done so well, and its source material, the Edith Wharton book, which is kind of, a feminist book, is done so well that I love the film and I identify with the film. In the same way with Evidoloni, I don't identify with those characters. I think sometimes if one is male, it's just assumed that one kind of has this sort of male identity, and that's not always true because, once again, my being a person of color never comes up. So there's a whole outlook there that's just kind of checked in at the door. And then I'm looking at it from a film point of view. Once in a while, something will really speak to me. Then I'll understand it as, oh, this is for my kind or something like that.
It's another place where we don't get enough authentic voices or, in diversity of the color of people's skin and their culture, their nature and nurture, and their lives are not shown. They're shown from the perspective, often, I'm just going to say it, patriarchal white men, which is dominating and has dominated the industry for a long time.
Another kind of way to look at the film is you can say, well, it's really important as a lesbian film, but it's also, we're calling it a film noir, kind of loosely calling it a film noir, but it's even more specific within that. It's a particular kind of film noir, and there were movies like this in the 90s, like Palmetto and U-Turn, and, calling back to those older films that weren't queer. I was also thinking about how, Jennifer, I know you like Goodfellas, and so one way to look at this is sort of like a mob movie as well, and kind of evaluated it that way. So I think it's some of those aspects that, for me, the film kind of disappointed in. I think some of what Eric's saying is fair in regards to those things. Anyway, straight, go on.
Some film trivia. The same year, she was in Embrace of the Vampire with Alyssa Milano, an erotic horror thriller where she's usually wearing a leather jacket and a short dress. So it's not the best film, but it is kind of funny if you're a Who's the Boss fan to see Alyssa Milano in an erotic horror thriller, and then Jennifer Tilly just pops up halfway through in it.
Yeah. Embrace the Vampire was on heavy rotation on Showtime.
I definitely miss sexuality in film, where the story is supported by the sexuality. I'd like to see more of it, more erotic thrillers. It definitely, I still go to the theaters. I want to see something naughty in the theater. I tell Jen, go see Pillion, because here you have two attractive straight men, and they're playing these gay lovers, and it felt naughty to watch it at my local suburban theater. And there's something exciting about seeing something you're really not supposed to see at a generic movie theater.
The erotic thriller genre of the 90s was so good. So good for fashion.
Sila, I just wanted to thank you for saying Pauline Oliveros, because I think that she is someone who has been forgotten by history, but is a super central composer to the 20th century and a super central lesbian in the 20th century. So thank you for name dropping her. I appreciate that.
That is something that we must admit, that Bergman and Oliveros and quite a few other people have no chance at becoming, famous and respected everywhere, because what they do is so special and so focused on a very uncommercial way. And what Paulino Oliveros did had really no way into the general public. It just, people don't want that.
Agreed.
People are not ready for that.
Agreed.
And it's very sad, but that's just the way it is.
Magnolia blooms wept silver rain, their petals bruised and pale.
I mean, my final thought on Bound is when you look at it in the context of being a film noir, and when we talk about being a neo-noir, it's something that takes the genre and doesn't just revive it, but it elevates it and it challenges it. And I think that the first time we are ever invited into the psychological mindset of a butch lesbian who's locked in a closet in 1996, that's a moment in cinema, and it should be recognized and such. And that is exactly what this film does and why I love it.
Yeah, I love that the women get to fall in love, they get to steal the money, and they get to ride off into the sunset. Again, there was some fantasy and wish fulfillment when I saw this as a young person, and stayed with me. It's something I rewatch and I still enjoy. And I also just being a fan of film in general. It's fun to see where the Wachowskis started, and I actually wish they would go back to doing some more smaller projects. They've gotten into television, which is great, but it just showed when they're just early and hungry and when they were really passionate about a project, and I'd love to see them get back to that. I'd love to see them work together again. I think that'd be amazing.
I had to think about a friend I had in when I was living in Boston. Both her and her husband were very, very gentle, very softy type of individuals, but she was very, very soft, very soft-spoken, and every time she opened her mouth, it was very profound. The way Tilly played her role, that impressed me from the beginning, especially towards the middle, because she is playing this very 1920s, focused on looks and the voice and the very controlled voice. But when she spoke in certain moments, you could tell that she was nowhere close to as silly and empty as she was kind of portraying. And I enjoyed very much that role for that reason.
Well, I think it's a low or lower budget masterpiece. It's a lesbian cult classic. And as others have said, the girl gets the girl and they drive away in a brand new truck with money, and still one of my favorite movies.
I'm really glad that this film exists and that it's had such a powerful place for so many people. And I think also the people involved were feeling it was very special because it's got amazing performances by the principals and the directors, and the cinematographer are working really hard on it. I think even more so than some of the amazing shots in it, the lighting especially really struck me. The color palette and the lighting is incredible. The only frustrations I had is just I felt that it was too heavy-handed, and kind of like what Eric was saying, I think a bit more, complexity in it without hitting the nail on the head too hard would have made the film a more satisfying film for me. But the biggest problem, I think, was disentangling this film from the Matrix films, which I really don't like. I think the first one has some good aspects or some good elements, but in its diminishing returns, and it just gets overshadowed by the real artificial nature of the films, which kind of works when you think it's kind of created by AI in this fictional world or whatever, but it's still really just the Wachowskis' aesthetics and their interests. And so the first time I saw this film decades ago, it was too close to the Matrix films. I saw it after the Matrix films, but it was too close to that for me to appreciate it. This time around, I could appreciate it more, but just even decades later, there are too many things that reminded me of the Matrix films, like the phone cord, which could have been powerful in and of itself. It was too much like the way it's used in the Matrix. Some of those camera movements is just too over the top for me, and I understand the value of camp. I'm just not sure that I buy that this is camp like in a David Lynch film or Showgirls, just to mention a couple of the references that were made earlier.
check us out on ko-fi.com/World Cinema History. We have all our old episodes there dating back. This is our 101st episode dating back 3 years. There's also a place where if you want to get better audio quality, you could leave us a tip and maybe we can upgrade that. Thanks, everybody. Next week, we are going to have a very special roundtable, a episode about film festival curation called Do We Still Need Film Festivals? Among the special guests who you did not meet today, Susan Gorell of the Julian de Buque Film Festival, one of the largest film festivals in the United States. Unless I'm Being Punked, friend of the show, Luke Higginson, director of Relax I'm from the Future, said he will also be able to join us to tell his story of how he tried to get it into American film festivals and couldn't. So, a lot to look forward to here on World Cinema History.
Your touch still